So today will be a non-programming lecture. I know, so sad. Next time we'll talk about Python, which is exciting. But this stuff is really cool too, I think. We're going to talk about fallacies first, and then interesting things, crime and security. So if you've never heard the word fallacy before, how many of us have, by the way? Have you heard that word before? Your argument has a fallacy in it. Nice, okay, so it's not unheard of. That's good. There's a big long list of them on plenty of places on the internet where I stole some of this information. But a fallacy is something that can appear in an argument, and it immediately means that that argument is messed up, which is nice. So if you can notice a fallacy, then like that argument just goes out the door. It's useless, which is kind of nice. So this is, we'll try and help explain like what kinds of arguments are ones that are not logical, ones that are just not good enough, ones that we should not allow when we are arguing. The second your opponent throws a fallacy into their argument, that entire argument is done for, which is really nice. So I'm going to teach you how to notice a few different kinds of fallacies, and the second you see one, whatever that the arguer against you said that involved that fallacy was immediately wrong, which is really nice, right? So that's pretty cool. So yeah, a fallacy is just it's a fancy name for like when you make when you make an error in your reasoning, when you mess up as you're arguing, all right? So that's the noun fallacy. We say that an argument is fallacious. That's the adjective form if it has a fallacy in it. And the second you find one, that argument is false, cannot be trusted. Pretty nice, all right? You got to tell them to try again, all right? Hopefully you catch yourself when you have your own fallacies in your own arguments too. So yeah, people like fallacies are very common. I'll give you some names for things, and I'm sure that you've seen these before. Because yeah, everybody likes to argue things to manipulate people. Other people, corporations love to manipulate you, of course, get you to buy things. Governments also like to manipulate the citizens of whatever country that they're governing. And so people use fallacies to try and manipulate people to do things. When in reality, it's a bad argument, and I want to teach you how to see through those things so that you can make your own decisions, all right? There is one big thing that is important for this class and a future essay, wink, wink. Every fallacy has a name. You can't just say, oh, this argument has a fallacy in it, it's wrong, and move on. In this class, for sure, I would like you to say, this is this kind of fallacy. This is a false dilemma fallacy or something like that. So every fallacy has a name in this class, and it's not good enough for me when you're doing something that I'm grading to just say that, oh, there's a fallacy in this argument. Analyze the fallacy, explain which one it is, because there's a big long list of different kinds, and go from there. Because a lot of people just like colloquially, they like to say the word fallacy when they mean like, oh, you just made a bad argument. Yes, it's a bad argument when there's a fallacy in it, but no, there's a specific kind of fallacy that made it a bad argument, if that makes sense. Okay, so always look for what kind of fallacy it is in this class. All right, they all have names, and I want you to use the names. All right. So yeah, I just have a bunch of different kinds of fallacies, and I am sure that you've heard a lot of these before, even if you didn't know the name, all right? So here's the first one. It's got a bunch of different kinds and examples. So this is called the false dilemma fallacy. It's got a bunch of different names. It's also called false dichotomy. It's also called, should I go back to normal? Yeah. It's also called the black and white fallacy. It appears a lot. And let me give you some examples after I define it. So yeah, it's just the idea of a false dilemma fallacy is like somebody's making the argument, and they're crafting the illusion that there's only two possibilities out of the universe of possibilities for this thing that we're arguing about. When in reality, there's definitely more than that. So they're trying to say that like, oh, you can either do X thing or Y thing, and that's all you get. When in reality, there's like a bunch of things Z's over here. Okay, that's what false dilemma is all about. So here are some silly examples of false dilemma fallacies. Like this pin, right? This pin that I stole from the internet. USA, love it or leave it. It's trying. This is a false dilemma fallacy. It's like, okay, either you love the U.S. or you should leave the U.S. When in reality, of course, there's a secret third option at least, where like I don't like what's going on in the country and I would like to stay here and help change it. Right? Do we all understand that? That is a fallacy. This is not correct, okay? Not correct to say that. It's making the illusion that there are only two possibilities. when in reality there are plenty more than that. So here are some other silly examples. Like, there are only two kinds of people in this world: people who love Phoebe Bridgers and people who hate music. Maybe we sometimes feel like this, but in reality, maybe some people just have bad taste, right? And they like other kinds of music. Okay? So that's a false dilemma fallacy again. And then here's one that I definitely stole from the internet. Stacy spoke out against socialism, so she must be a fascist. It's a weird statement, but it's trying to like put people into two different categories. They like seeing the world as only black and white, right? So you're either a socialist or a fascist, when in reality there's a whole spectrum in between. Yeah. So yeah, I hope that makes sense. Any questions about the false dilemma fallacy? The second you see this, it's like it's a bad argument. Does that make sense? You kind of understand that now? There's plenty of other things that could have gone on, and the world is not black and white, and so this is a bad argument. Try again. Okay, that's the goal there. So yeah, I just got a bunch more like that. This next one is called ad populum. This is a Latin phrase. There's a lot of fallacies that have Latin words as their names. This is when people started studying logic back in the Roman days, I guess. This is also called the bandwagon fallacy. So you probably heard like everyone's jump on the bandwagon. This has to do with that. So yeah, this ad populum stands for, or it means, to the populace, or to the popularity, or to the people. All right. So it's saying that when you make an argument with the ad populum fallacy, again, it's wrong. It's when you are assuming, or your opponent assumes, that something is true or nice or good just because other people agree with that thing. All right. So it's like you're following the bandwagon in a sense. Like here's the populace. Like everybody's like, oh, the populace, all the people, they love thing X. I love thing X. I love thing X. I love thing X. And then the fallacy is to go from that and notice like, oh, so many people love thing X, therefore X must be good. Okay, do you see how that's not a good jump to make there? All right, and this is a great fallacy that like manufacturers like to use to get you to buy their products. So like you'll probably have seen plenty of things like this, like drink Gatorade, because that's what all the professional athletes do to stay hydrated as they're playing their sports game. Yeah. Obviously, that's like, you should get on the bandwagon too and buy Gatorade, when in reality, maybe there's something better. Okay? Or you should just drink water. Who knows? So it's assuming something is true or good because other people agree with it, and that is a great way. It's like peer pressure, right? It's a great way to get you to do something, when in reality, it's not a good argument. Right? Maybe just the entire populace don't understand, or they have bad taste, or in reality, this is not good. Like back in the day, like everybody smoked, right? And they thought that was fine. Obviously, that was a bad idea. Yeah. So yeah, there's that. Another idea, like Jimi Hendrix, he used Fender Stratocasters as his main guitar, so like I need one too, right? When in reality, you can probably get the same tone with a cheaper guitar or a different brand, right? So it's just following the bandwagon. It's not true, right? It's not true that something's good because other people think it is. They could be wrong. Right? I hope that makes sense. And this just like leads to a lot of issues. This mindset, right? I'm sure you've seen people that like think like this. Oh, my parents think this thing. They believe that this is good, so I think I need to as well. I'm gonna follow in their footsteps and think this thing as well. And that's how like racism is still a thing. So that's a huge problem. So yeah, ad populum, it's a bad argument, right? When somebody's trying to say, oh, this is good because look at all these other people who like it. They could all just be wrong, okay? So that's the ad populum fallacy. Hope that makes some sense. Just yell at me if you have any questions about this stuff. It's fun to think about. We've seen these. We just haven't heard that they have names. Maybe we didn't know, like, oh, we couldn't explain why somebody's argument that included these kinds of things were wrong. Okay. So the next one is called circular reasoning, and it's a weird one because it's very subtle, honestly. It's when you are repeating your assumption as your conclusion. Remember that arguments have they're like building on top of a bunch of assumptions and trying to use that as firepower towards a conclusion. Which honestly, it's like, okay, yes, the thing is good because the thing is good. That's kind of the argument, and that is circular reasoning. You'd think that would be really easy to notice, but it's not. So yeah, this is kind of how that argument looks. Assume thing X is good. therefore, right, and then use that to conclude, therefore x is good, which is obviously a bad argument, right? But it's hard to notice. It's hard to notice that the assumption is being repeated a lot of the time, right? It's also called begging the question. Silly example from the internet. Sometimes, or a lot of the time, a lot of the examples that I could find of this on the internet, at least the shorter ones, involve just like people hiding behind large words. So that's how they're like getting the same thing in both sides, and you don't really see it. So like here's an example of circular reasoning. Opium induces sleep because it has a soporific quality. So this is hiding behind a big word, right? Soporific just means, I think that's how you pronounce it. Am I pronouncing that wrong? Up in my dictionary. Yeah, no, that is correct. All right. Has a soporific quality. That just means it causes sleep. Okay, so it's like it causes sleep because it causes sleep. That is not a good argument, right? What about this one? Everybody wants to buy Phoebe Bridgers' new album because it's the hottest album this season. It's like everybody wants to buy the album because everybody wants to buy the album. It's not a good argument, right? It's not saying anything. It's circular reasoning. See that? So yeah, that's a good example, I think. And then here's another one I stole from the internet. It's again hiding behind large words, flowery terms. It's not really saying anything. There's no substance with circular reasoning arguments. Okay? So, all right, here, let me read this. Try to follow along. To allow every man an unbounded freedom of speech. This is pro-freedom of speech. To allow every man an unbounded freedom of speech must always be, on the whole, advantageous to the state. For it is highly conducive to the interests of the community that each individual should enjoy a liberty perfectly unlimited of expressing his sentiments. All right? Flowery words. What's it trying to really say? And let's find the circular reasoning in it. It's like, to allow every man an unbounded freedom of speech must be advantageous. So that's the conclusion, right? Saying it first. Must be advantageous to the state. So like, the U.S. should be pro-freedom of speech. We should make those laws for freedom of speech. And then for means because, right? Because, and then here's like the assumption. Here's like what we're trying to use to imply this guy. For it is highly conducive to the interests of the community that each individual should enjoy a liberty perfectly unlimited of expressing his sentiments. What does that mean? That just means freedom of speech, right? Freedom of speech is good because freedom of speech is good. It's very silly. So, yeah, it's hard. It's surprisingly subtle to notice that there's circular reasoning going on, but the second you see it, there is no substance to the argument. You can immediately bash it down like, nope, that argument that you just gave to me, it has circular reasoning in it. Try again. That does not make sense. It is not correct to say that. All right? So, yeah. And that's kind of the idea. Just got a few more. So this one is called denying the antecedent. This one is more having to do with logic. You got some words with Latin roots for sure in this. This is called a formal fallacy, by the way. It has to do with like the logical symbols that we've been learning about. You can translate arguments into that a lot of the time. These other ones are called informal fallacies, by the way. They're like they occur in like real life speech, but they wouldn't really occur if you translated everything to the logical symbols. This one would still kind of exist if you translate it to logical symbols. Formal fallacy. So when you mess up with the symbol pushing even, all right? So it has to do with logic. And here's what it means to deny the antecedent. It's when you say this, you assume this. Assume that if P then Q is a true thing. Like that's your, and that is your assumption. Assume that this is true. P implies Q. If P is true, then Q is true. And then you're trying to conclude from that kind of the opposite. Therefore, all right, if this is a true thing, like from P I can get to Q, then okay, if you give me not P, if I don't have P, then I must not have Q. That's kind of what it's saying, right? If you're assuming this, P gives me Q, you're trying to prove then that, okay, not having P must not give me Q. Does that kind of make sense? A good example will be down here. Give me a second. That's what it's trying to do. That's your assumption. That's your conclusion. This is, if you do the truth table, like assume this, assume you're in a row where this makes sense and this is true, you'll notice that this could never be possible, right? It's not true all the time. So what you can conclude from this assumption is the opposite. You can conclude that not Q, that will give you not P. Like that is true, that is correct. But this way, like you got to flip it and negate everything. But this way, going from here to here, just negating things and not flipping things around, that is not correct. All right. So here's a good example of that. So here's an assumption. Here's kind of like the two-part conclusion. It's technically, there are two pieces of it, though. So assume the first two bullets, and then we're trying to conclude the last bullet. And this is a denying the antecedent fallacy. So here are our two assumptions. Assume this, and then we're trying to conclude this. And you can kind of see how both of these kind of create this idea. Okay, so, and I hope you can see it with this example, like why it's wrong. So here's the first thing. Assume this. Assume that if you are a ski instructor, then you have a job. Right? That's a normal thing to assume. Right? That's a correct thing. Right? If you are a ski instructor, that can be our P. Then you totally do have a job. That could be our Q. You having a job is Q. All right? And then we're trying to conclude from that, okay, then if you're not a ski instructor, then you don't have a job. You see that? And you're kind of doing it in two parts. Like, okay, assume then you are not a ski instructor, all right? Not P. Then, right, therefore you have no job, not Q. See how that's incorrect reasoning? You could be a teacher. You don't have to just like, the only job in the world is not ski instructor, right? There's more than that. So that's a formal fallacy. You're trying to assume this, which is technically correct to assume, right? If you are a ski instructor, you have a job. But you can't work at it like this. You can't like go from, all right, if you're not a ski instructor, then you don't have a job. You can't conclude that, right? That's incorrect. You could conclude this. You could conclude that if you don't have a job, then you're not a ski instructor. Do you see how that way works still? You got to flip them. So that's the secret. This more comes up with formal logic. But I hope that makes sense. All right, please yell at me if it does not. All right, I got a few more, and some of these we've seen for sure. So this one's called tu quoque. It's another Latin term. It's a fun word to say. This is Latin for you too, or you also. It's like shoving the argument right back at somebody. So it's also called the appeal to hypocrisy, which is a fun word as well. So what tu quoque is all about is it's just kind of like the argument is a distraction. It's not really a good argument. Of course, they're all fallacies. But what it's doing is distracting from the main argument by pointing out that your opponent is a hypocrite for saying what they said. All right, they're deflecting blame. And the reason this is a fallacy is because you can be a hypocrite, right? You can be a hypocrite and still be right about things. That's the main reason. And I have some good examples of this. Hypocrite and still be right. All right. So your standard example is like the U.S. criticizing Russia for something silly that they've done, right? Something bad, and then Russia fires back at the U.S. saying like, "Oh no, do you remember all the bad things you did in South America back in the '60s or whatever?" They're just trying to deflect the blame, right? When in reality, yes, the U.S. has committed their own fair share of bad things. They've done their own bad deeds. But it's still okay for the U.S. to criticize Russia, right? When, okay, that was 50 years ago. We've learned from that. You have not. You see how that's kind of the idea there? It's like trying to say that, oh, no, you did that bad thing too, when in reality, maybe you learned from the problem and you're trying to help your friend. Yeah? That's kind of the goal. Is all about. You're just trying to deflect blame by saying that no, you did that thing too, okay? And then here's a good example, a couple more good examples of this. That one for sure. Bad things with China as well. And then what's this one? I forget. Dun, dun, dun. Yeah. Again, just the U.S. firing back oh, you do bad things. Oh, you did bad things too. So it's you can't criticize people when in reality, sure you can. It's okay to do bad things and then also tell other people not to do bad things, I guess, right? It's still correct to say those things. I hope that makes sense. So you can be a hypocrite and still be right. So it's not a good argument to bash somebody down for what they did in the past, let's say, all right? And that kind of leads into this one. It's called the genetic fallacy, which is, this one I understand probably the least. It's not the most common, but it has to do with the past as well. So the genetic fallacy, when you have an argument that has that in it, it's when your argument talks about or relies upon the history of someone or something rather than the way that they're treated or thought of in the present, right? Something, the origin of something, or you're arguing about the origin of something when in reality it's irrelevant to the origin of that thing. Okay, so here's a silly example. first, I guess we have an abstract example, right? So when the information is no longer relevant is the idea, okay? So it's like talking about the past when the past doesn't matter anymore. Talking about the past when the past is not relevant. So this kind of bleeds into Tu Quoque for sure, in certain cases. So here's like a silly example, like something used to be a bad thing, like interpreted badly, but times have changed, and that old interpretation doesn't hold true anymore. All right. So here's an example I saw from the internet, and I'm not actually sure if this was true. Please tell me if you learned about this, because I honestly didn't know. But here's like a silly argument that involves the genetic fallacy. And hopefully we'll see the problem. It's like, you're not going to wear a wedding ring, are you? Don't you know that the wedding ring originally symbolized ankle chains worn by women to prevent them from running away from their husbands? I would not have thought you would be a party to such a sexist practice. So that's an example argument, right? Talking about wedding rings. Is this actually true? I honestly don't know if they're making this up or not. I didn't look into it too far. But like, that's wild if that's really true. But still, it's a bad argument, right? It's a horrible argument because these days wedding rings don't mean that at all, right? They symbolize like the love that two partners have for each other. Yeah, that has nothing to do with ankle chains anymore. That's for sure. So yeah, it's a bad argument because it's bringing up the past when like that idea, if that was even true, is no longer relevant. Assuming that it is, it's not at all relevant anymore. Okay. And this also can come up with like politics, like, oh, this news story about the Purple Party candidate must be fake news because XYZ News reported on it. And we all know that XYZ News was owned by somebody who is against the Purple Party, so I can't trust anything they say about it. All right? Technically, this is still a fallacy. This is wrong when a lot of people think this, right? So the Purple Party and XYZ News, they hate each other, I guess. But again, maybe the Purple Party candidate really did something wrong. This is not a good enough argument. It has the genetic fallacy all over it because, like, the origin of some information, it does not impact the truth of that information if it's really true, right? So maybe they really just got the scoop on something and the Purple Party did mess up for once, right? So origins have no impact on truth. That's why you got to get your news from a lot of different sources. All right. So yeah, that's the genetic fallacy. Honestly, it's the one I understand the least because it comes up the least, but hopefully you can kind of understand it. It's like the origins of things, talking about those when they don't matter. Okay? All right. How many more do I have? I got two more for us. And these ones you probably definitely heard and seen in the wild. All right. The first one is called a straw man, which is a cute little name. And another term for the straw man fallacy is when you're putting words into someone's mouth. You've probably heard that phrase before. You're putting words in my mouth. Putting words in someone's mouth. All right. And this is when, like, the arguer is attacking a position that their opponent doesn't really hold. They don't really think that thing, but they're attacking it anyway. And it's like you're turning a person who makes a straw man fallacy is turning their opponent's argument into an easily defeatable one that's made of straw. You can like kick it down easily, rather than an actual argument that has some weight to it. Okay, so this comes up a whole lot in real life, but here are some examples of that. Like, here's a fake example from like a bank robbery case. Like, there's a lawyer given like the closing arguments, and it's the prosecution, I guess. They're trying to get the bank robber convicted. So they said, I submit to you that if you can't take this evidence and find these defendants guilty, then we might as well just open up all the banks and say, come on and get the money, boys, because we'll never be able to convict them. Right? The future bank robbers, talking about all the future bank robbery cases. Like, if we don't convict this one person right now, every other future bank robber is going to go free. And that's just a horrible argument, right? Maybe this defendant is really innocent because the information was like circumstantial. Right? All that evidence was bad evidence. and we don't actually know beyond a shadow of a doubt that this bank robber really was at the bank at that time, something like that. Okay, it's not correct to say this. Like this trial has no impact on any future bank robbery trials, and that's what this argument is trying to say. Right? It's putting words into the defense's mouth, which, when in reality, the defense is trying to just get that one person off because, like, maybe they were just in the wrong place at the wrong time and they didn't commit the crime. That's putting words in someone's mouth. Obviously, that's a bad argument. Here's another silly argument coming up on wintertime. So person A is like, the children's winter concert at the school should include some non-Christmas songs too. Okay, that's their argument. Like, okay, that's what they want. And then person B is like, you know, you won't be happy until Christmas songs are banned from being played on the radio. How dare you even think that thing? And so person B is trying to, like, argue back at person A's statement, saying this. And this is a straw man argument, right? Person A never said, right, I want to ban all the Christmas songs everywhere, always, right? But that's what person B is trying to claim that they kind of said, right? They're bashing down that idea, right? That's an easy thing to bash down. No, you should never stop all Christmas songs from being played on the radio. But that's not what person A is trying to say. They just really like that one Coldplay song, I don't know, that's about wintertime. Has nothing to do with I hate Christmas music, right? When that's what person B is trying to claim that person A said. You see that that's not what they actually said. That's the secret. That's the straw man argument, right? It's a fallacy the second you see it. When you bash down an argument, like, oh, like this is an easy argument to bash down. Yes, that is a bad thing. Nobody ever should want that. When in reality, that's not at all what person A was saying. Okay? So that's straw man. We're still good. We got one more at least that I want to teach you in class. All right, this one's an easy one. You see this all the time. It's called ad hominem. All right, another Latin word for to the man or to the person. And this is the most common argument on the internet. It's the most common fallacy on the internet for sure, by far. It's when you're attacking the arguer instead of the argument. All right, it's like you're insulting somebody. You're just like insulting a person, attacking the person themselves, rather than their arguments in support of like whatever you think. All right, so it's just like a standard example on the internet is like, you suck, you're wrong, right? When in reality, that's not a good counter argument to whatever the first person said. So here's some examples I stole from the internet. Jones likes a football team from the East Coast. Clearly, he's unfit to be a police chief in California. So, okay, this is trying to link these two ideas, like something about the person, right? Jones likes a football team from the East Coast, right? And we're trying to use that as an argument towards why he would be a bad police chief. And those two things, they don't mix. It's attacking the arguer rather than like the person's qualifications for the actual job. Like, what have they done in the past? Yeah. So that's the idea. So that's ad hominem for sure. This is an example of ad hominem that, like, if you were a juror on a jury, you might fall for, right? I think you might fall for this. I probably might if I didn't learn about this ahead of time. You cheated and lied to your wife, but you expect the jury to believe you now? Do you see how that is an ad hominem? First of all, that is an ad hominem fallacy. When if the case is about anything other than the wife, all right? I hope that makes sense. It's like this is something about the person, like they did a bad thing, yes, and then they're trying to use that as firepower for, like, okay, that proves that this other person is lying right now. They could never say the truth ever again. That is ad hominem. But it's still, like, we might be swayed, right? Because maybe the case has nothing to do with the wife, right? It has something like some weird other thing. So maybe this is the bank robbery case. I don't know. Maybe the case has nothing to do with this. Has nothing to do with infidelity. Do you see how that's attacking the person, right? Not trying to, like, you're saying that we can't trust you now. When in reality, maybe, I don't know, there were extenuating circumstances. I have no clue, right? But that is still attacking the person rather than, like, the topic of the case, if that makes sense, all right? I'm not trying to say that cheating is good, but it's still an ad hominem fallacy, all right? It's attacking a person rather than the argument itself, all right? So I hope that makes enough sense. Those are enough examples of things. I just have a couple questions for you to try now, all right? Oh, did I forget to start attendance, by the way? I'm so sorry. I think I did. let's do that. And then once we do this, I have some questions for you. So yeah, let's please do attendance. I'm glad I remembered. Please yell at me if I forget, sorry. And then after that, we'll do a by clicker question. All right. So please tell me you're here, and we'll do this, and I'll get that started too, I guess. But here's your question. Here is a tweet back when it was still called Twitter, and there is totally a fallacy in this tweet. All right. See if you can remember. Keep all these terms straight. Okay. I'll try to just explain them right now, but like read this. There is an issue. This is an argument with a fallacy in it, this tweet, and see if it's ad populum, like bandwagon fallacy, tu quoque, like you too, you did this thing too, straw man, putting words in your mouth, false dilemma, like black and white thing. The world is not black and white, ad hominem, attacking a person, right, rather than the real thing. See, like, there might be multiple options. Try to choose the best option you can think of, all right, for this tweet. Can you find the fallacy in it? Because it's not a good argument. Can you see why? Please help your neighbors. Convince them that you are right. E and E. So two quick ways, like let's pretend that you're the U.S. and I'm Russia, and you're telling me like, oh, you did some horrible war crimes in Ukraine, and like you should feel bad about yourself, Russia. And then I tell you back, you did some horrible things in South America, U.S. Why are you criticizing me? In reality, like you should still be saying that you're a bad person. So that's two quick ways. And then E. E is just saying like, oh, you suck, so you're wrong, rather than saying like, oh, this is why your argument is wrong. It has nothing to do with the argument. All right, get your best guess in there. We'll talk about it. Let's see. And did we do attendance too? Can I stop that as well? I'll stop it after the next one. I got two of these for us. Yeah, let's see. Let's see what we're thinking. Nice. We're getting toward at least not A and B. We don't think it's A and B for sure. But it could be C, D, or E, and there is not a majority. Is there? Well, most of us are thinking E. The largest amount is thinking E. It's like attacking the person. So okay, let's break this down because there could be multiple options for sure. Where would you like to see? Where would you? I think they forgot a word. Where would you rather like to see your meat come from? A chemical factory on an industrial estate, or a green field in the middle of the countryside? All right. So yeah, not really telling anybody they suck. I don't think right now. I think that what it's trying to do, this argument is trying to say that you got two options, right? You can get your meat from this thing or from this thing, yeah? And it's trying to say that there's only two options right now. The world is black and white, and that would go and be false dilemma. Does that kind of make sense? Like, you either have your meat come from a chemical factory or a green field. I would say most likely that is false dilemma, okay? Because it's not talking about somebody else's argument. It's not saying that you are saying this and this is why you're wrong, all right? And it's not really telling somebody like, you suck because you buy all your meat from the chemical factory. It's just saying like, here are your options. Which one would you rather have? Does that make sense? So that is going to be for sure false dilemma, at least I think, right? That's how I would think about it. It's like, okay, yeah, you get these two options when in reality, there's nothing else, is what the argument's saying. We as presidents, right, we know that, like, there's of course option 3, like you could have like all the cows in, there's plenty of brown fields all around the county, right? It doesn't have to be just green, but there are definitely 3rd and 4th and 5th options, okay? That's the idea. So that would be false dilemma. Does that make sense? Giving the illusion that there's only 2 options. In reality, like we all know because we live around here, there's definitely at least one more, okay? All right, one more. Whee! So let's talk about this one, and then I'll stop attendance after this one too. So, okay. This is back in the height of the pandemic. I stole this from like one of the local news channels websites, and so here was like the news article on like Facebook or something, and it said like, okay, it was like President Biden gave a speech or something back when he was president, or no, he's still president, sorry. He said, "Get your shot today. There is no time to waste. Nationwide, cases are still rising, especially among the unvaccinated." So that's like what the video said. That's what the argument was, right? And or that was like the thing that's being bashed down by this guy. So, and then here is a Facebook response, right? Somebody commented to this this idea, saying that BS, even the vaccinated are getting COVID. All right. So say President Biden said this. Get your shot today. There's no time to waste. Cases are rising right now, especially among the unvaccinated. And this person said this. So this comment has a fallacy in it. All right. Tell me which one. Which one can you think? Do you see here? All right. Is it ad populum? Trying to say you did this bad thing too, so why should I trust your ideas, your thoughts? Is it trying to put words into somebody's mouth? Like, I didn't say that. Why would you even think I did? That's not correct. False dilemma. Like, do I have one option or the other, and like they're trying to claim that there's no 3rd option, or is it just attacking somebody ad hominem? Like, you suck, and so I don't trust you. So you were wrong. All right. Was that? I think we all got an answer, and are we good? We think we're ready. All right. Let's see. This one, I think there's a couple of options here I could see. So, all right, we're thinking B, C, or D, and let's see here. I think B and C for sure. I could see that. Let me try and think if D is possible. What are the 2 options? It's like even the vaccinated are getting COVID. I don't think I could see this as being a D, being false dilemma, because it's only saying like this is your one option, right? Vaccinated are getting COVID or not getting COVID, maybe. And honestly, there are only 2 options, right? If you're vaccinated, you are getting COVID or you're not getting COVID. I guess I could maybe see like, okay, maybe you think that this argument is like there's really 4 options. Either you're vaccinated or unvaccinated, or then you got COVID or you didn't get COVID, and like there's 4 options total. Like maybe that I could see that, but it would take some thought. All right, so maybe D, but I'm thinking more strongly B or C, specifically C. All right, I think I would pick C, and let me try and explain why. Let me go back to blue. So I think that this is putting words into the president's mouth when he said this. Get your shot today. There's no time to waste. Nationwide cases are rising, especially among the unvaccinated. It's like, get your shot because you're at risk, right? You're at risk if you don't get the shot. Cases are rising, especially among the unvaccinated. And this argument is trying to say like, well, yeah, of course, I don't need to get my shot because even the vaccinated are getting COVID. What's the point? When in reality, the president said nothing about the vaccinated not getting COVID. He said that cases are rising, especially among the unvaccinated. The whole point of the shot was that you get it and you're less likely to get the bad thing, right? That's the whole point. So do you see how that was kind of putting words into the president's mouth? He didn't say anything about the vaccinated not getting COVID. He's just saying like, okay, if you do get COVID, you probably get a less powerful version of the virus, all right? And that's why you should get the shot. That is the idea. So that is totally strawman in my mind. Do you see that? It's like, okay, he's putting words into somebody's mouth. It's not true. I can see two cool ways as well. It's like you're saying like, oh, you're getting, you too, you're getting COVID too. So like, why should I trust your thoughts? Like, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. Like, I could see that. But too quickly is probably more like, it's more about like when somebody does something wrong and you're saying like, you did this bad thing. It's like an action rather than an effect. On COVID, I would say it's just like an effect. All right. So yeah, that's why I would probably pick C. I would probably gravitate towards C. But again, if you do your arguing enough, you could tell me why the other ones are, they make sense. Okay. Any questions about that? So, not too horrible, I hope. But the goal is to teach you all these so that you'll spot them in the wild. And eventually, I'm going to give you an essay where you go on the internet and you find people messing up in their arguments. And so that'll be fun. Not today. Look forward to that. All right. So if we're good, I'm ready to switch gears to something completely different. Are we ready for it? All right. In the remainder of class, let's talk about crime and security. All right, something a little more close to computer science, maybe. But of course, you can tie all the fallacies to like arguments in computer science. Let's talk about some bad stuff that's happened because of technology, because like not everything is just good. Though there is, I would say that the good outweighs the bad. And then like, how can we stay safe on the internet? Because we're on there all day long nowadays. All right. So yeah, let's talk about like what could go wrong on the internet. Like you got hackers out there is like the first thing that might come to mind. So the word hacking, by the way, it used to mean that like it used to mean a good thing. It was a positive term. It still is in like computer science tech speak. So hacking used to be a positive term. It just meant that like a person who was a hacker, they were good with computers. Like that was a positive trait to be a hacker. Okay, all right. And then like people who are talking, like people who are trained in computer science, they say this as well. Like hack in programming still means something different. Like, oh, the class website is completely hacked together, but it works. Right? That's something that you could say, and it doesn't mean anything bad. It means something bad in a different way, maybe. All right. So yeah, it used to be a positive term. It still kind of is in certain terms and in certain corners of the society. But now, of course, hacking means bad things for most people, right? Because why? People started to we started to connect our computers to everybody, and then people could cause some real damage because, like, from the comfort of their home or like from a payphone, they could dial in to like the bank's network and like steal money or something silly like that. Okay, so people started to cause real damage once we started connecting computers together, and yeah, like the first hackers. I just want to give you a little bit of a history lesson. The first hackers were called, or people who were messing with payphones, right? They were the phone phreakers. And here's what they did. It's a funny idea. It's a funny story. This is kind of the origins of hacking. Back when it was just not so much computers, but like phones that were interconnected. So do we all know what a payphone is, by the way? Like they don't really exist anymore. And I know that we're young. But a payphone used to be like this. Like you have a little phone sticking out of the ground, right? And of course it was connected using wires. This is back before cell phones, right? They were a big deal. So payphones look like that. You put some money in the little slot, and it let you talk for a while. That's how they worked. Okay. What the phone phreakers decided, or they learned back in I think the 70s, is when you were making a phone call, when you put your money in, it made a little chime across the phone line. And then AT&T's network was like, oh, yes, that chime got made by the phone booth, and therefore they put a quarter in. I will let the phone call last 15 minutes. Right? So it was the chime, not the coin, right? The coin made a tone on the network, on the phone line. And the phone phreakers, they made some devices. They noticed, like, they figured out, like, what frequency that tone was, and they just made a little, like, little whistle that kind of made that tone for them. And they blew it in through the phone, like the receiver bit. And it's like the little computer on the other end didn't really notice the difference between it coming from the phone itself or from the receiver. And so it created those tones to mean like, okay, you put a bunch of money into that payphone, essentially. And so people could just make calls for free. It was pretty innocuous. That like you weren't messing with anything. Like the best story from this is like somebody in San Francisco, one of the phone phreakers, he got to the person, like the assistant to the Pope. Like he called the Vatican, claiming to be the president, and he got to the person right before the Pope, just faking the call. All right, which is kind of funny to think about. So, but still, didn't really cause any real issues. And then nowadays, though, computers, right? They got back in the 80s, I guess we started connecting computers to each other, and then you can send data, and that's a problem, right? Because then that gives way to like worms and viruses and things. So there are these are two different things, by the way. A virus is they're both bad programs, right? It's a malicious program, but a virus, you need to download it. You need to mess up, right? It needs to be downloaded and activated. Like you double clicked a file, like you thought you downloaded a game for free or something. You double click it and like, oh no, it just takes over your entire computer. So that's what a virus is. It has to be activated. A worm is like a virus, but it's auto-activating. All right, it's self-replicating and self-activating. All right, and the internet, of course, makes these bad. Okay, now that we're connecting every computer to every other computer, so yeah, hackers. The term is not a good term anymore. Though, if you take the right classes, like a company will hire you to be a hacker for them, which is a nice gig, honestly, just to test their own security so that the real bad hackers, like, they don't get in. So that's kind of cool, right? So yeah, viruses need to be downloaded and activated, and then worms can like do it themselves. And then you can be a white hat hacker to help companies. And yeah, just the second we start connecting computers, like you can start like hacking into banks, and then you can like steal financial information, steal personal information. Like we get a couple things in the mail every year saying that, oh yeah, we got a data breach, right? That's because of this. Okay, silly hackers. So yeah, let me just talk about some relatively recent developments. This is kind of a cool example of a worm. It's called Stuxnet. It was a while ago. It's like 15 years ago now, but it was a very sophisticated worm, and what it was a malicious program that targeted not just every computer on the internet, but a specific kind of computer that was controlling heavy machinery, right? Heavy machinery that was used to like spin uranium really fast and like make it pure. So yeah, it only infected certain kinds of computers, and it like sought out these heavy machinery computers that were part of like uranium enrichment facilities in Iran. Only in Iran, right? So damaged equipment. It told those machines to spin as even faster than they could possibly spin. It gave those signals to it. It's like, and that broke them, all right? So yeah, it damaged a lot of equipment in Iran. And the rumor is that this was a state-sponsored worm. So the rumor is that the U.S. and Israel, they didn't like Iran having a nuclear program, and so they were going to try and stall it by getting this worm onto their machine. So only if Windows was configured in Iranian or something, did it strike. And yeah, that's the rumor. It's probably true that the U.S. and Israel built it together to try and like take over that, make sure they slow them down, which is cool to think about, right? It's a while ago. Okay, so there's that. That was an example of a worm. That was part of your textbook. Here's another thing from the textbook. Back in 2013, so over a decade ago now, there was a Target breach. And actually, somebody in one of my classes a couple semesters ago, they were affected by this, which is crazy to think about. So, all right, this is unfortunate. This is a sad thing that happened. A lot of information got stolen, and sadly, the hacking wasn't done to target themselves. This wasn't originally Target that got hacked, but they still ended up getting hacked because of it. Crazy. Let me spell this correctly. So the company that originally got hacked was called Fazio Mechanical. I think that's how you pronounce it. And they just did HVAC stuff for Target. They're contractors, refrigeration maintenance as well. And the idea was that they would go and work at like a Target place, and they would log into a Target system, like they would given access somehow. And this was all done due to phishing, if we've heard of that term before. Like we all, at least every employee on the campus here, I don't know if they give it to you guys too, but like I have to go every 2 years get trained to spot phishing and all this. So it's like phishing is when like somebody is trying to send you an email claiming to be somebody else, right? Attempting to obtain sensitive information by pretending to be somebody else. That's what phishing is. Usually happens in emails. It's like, oh, you just won $100, or we're about to shut down your Amazon account. Click here to change your password or something, and then it takes you to a website that looks exactly like Amazon, but it's not really Amazon, and it gets your password that way. So that's what happened to this Fazio Mechanical. unfortunate employee at Fazio Mechanical got sent a phishing email. It looked legit to them, and they clicked on the link, and that link just installed a virus on their computer, and it was listening for usernames and passwords. It was like getting every key that they typed, and unfortunately, that person eventually went to Target, right, and logged in with the Target credentials, and that let them in. That let them in. They found some more issues with the Target network probably, and they gained access to a big database that held a lot of credit card data. And so there was a ton of credit card fraud just because one person clicked a bad link and it wasn't even a person from Target. Crazy. All right. So banks back in 2013, they had to spend a lot of money, $200 million, to just give a bunch of people new credit cards because they all got their identity stolen, right? And like on top of like trying their best to cancel all the transactions, right? All the fraud being done with those card numbers. Crazy. That was a breach a little over a decade ago now. Wild. Like now that we've connected so many computers and everybody's going to Target as well. Like all these things, they're just ripe for the taking if you have a malicious person who's trying to get in, all right? Sometimes it's easy to get in. And so how do we fight this, right? How do we fix this? How do we make our computers more secure? There's plenty of strides being, or plenty of work being done, strides being made in the biometrics field. And so this has to do with like unlocking your phone with your thumbprint and all that. So like fingerprints, from biology, right? Biometrics are like your fingerprint, using your fingerprint as a password. So that's usually just yours, right? It's always on you. You never can forget it. There's also like things that are a little bit more fancy, like using your iris. The shape of everybody's iris in their eye is unique to everybody. And so you can use that as a password. You're never going to lose that in theory. So yeah, that's biometrics. A lot of biological features are unique, like your fingerprints, your iris. You can use that as your password a lot of the time. Like that happens a lot where like there needs to be top security, like military places, when airport personnel are trying to walk in and do their job. So that's where biometrics has been used mostly, also on phones and laptops these days. But biometrics can be fooled. There's like a cat and mouse game between the people who are trying to take over and get information and the people who are trying to stay safe. So biometrics can be fooled. You can technically make a model of your thumbprint. It's possible. It's just harder to do, right? And like the systems are getting fancier and fancier, trying to be tamper-proof, but then the hackers are trying to also break in as well. So it's always it's an eternal cat and mouse game, but maybe one day the security researchers will be even more on top. But yeah, that's a thing, and that's one way we stay safe in top secret environments. One way that we stay safe on the internet is, I think I kind of mentioned this once upon a time. It's we're encrypting all the things that we send across the network, more or less these days. We're using what's called TLS, stands for Transport Layer Security. Whenever we talk to a website, pretty much these days, because all of our websites, they look like this. So you go to Amazon.com, that's not the full thing, right? It really starts with https:// and that S stands for secure. Right? It has transport layer security, and that's how all of your traffic is kept secure on the internet. Like it makes sure that only the person on the other end that you're actually talking to, that server, can understand what you mean. It's just garbled to everybody else. It's encrypted. So it uses cryptography to ensure that everything's happy and encrypted. It can use a bunch of different schemes, and Canvas, for example. We noticed that last time. Like, why is this connection secure? More information. TLS. Ooh, you can view the certificate. Why should we trust the Canvas website? Apparently Amazon says so. Why can we trust it? Here's the encryption that we're using. RSA. For us to trust Canvas. So yeah, we learned about that. Pretty cool. Alright, so yeah, any website that, pretty much all of them these days start with HTTPS, they use TLS and some form of encryption. Like our class server, or our class website, uses a different kind, alright? But it's still good. So yeah, that's one way that we are keeping our things secure. Until we make quantum computers, if you've heard of that, this is going to be pretty safe for a while, alright? So, sometimes though, for security purposes, we lower our amounts of security, which is unfortunate, I think. It's a little weird that this is a thing. It seems backwards, but it is also useful in the right situation. All right, so there are backdoors being placed into a lot of systems that are a lot of the time just required by law. Honestly, in a lot of countries, or like in a shady way, like you may have learned about as you were doing your Snowden essay. So yeah, backdoors are placed all the time for law enforcement into software. So law enforcement agencies like the police, the FBI, they don't like when things are unbreakably encrypted. Like our class website traffic, technically, is you cannot unless you steal something very, very important, like you go to the server where it's hosted, you cannot notice like which button you're. Sorry, you can't like learn your password or anything unless you do something on the computers themselves. Like the information being transferred across the internet when you click a link on the class website or on Canvas or something. Like not even the FBI can break that. All right, unless the keys were shared with them. All right, that's the secret. So yeah, the police don't like when things are unbreakably encrypted. They like to hold the key as well sometimes. Right. So there's a good example of like a murder investigation was stalled for a while. The FBI was doing some investigation on murder, and they just couldn't unlock an iPhone because Apple really cares about security, and they didn't go through the proper channels to actually like give it to Apple and have them help. So they waited a long time to get some information off the phone, which could have helped them. All right, because of the encryption levels of a lot of modern day software and hardware. Okay? So because of this, because it would have been better if we had this faster, a lot of countries and their governments, they're asking any software companies based there to include backdoors. That's the technical term, right, for them. A way for them to get in and get some information, like to unlock the phones if they need to, all right? For they want some backdoors for them baked into their software and systems and things, right? And sometimes we don't even know about it. But the question is this okay to do, right? You can see the two sides of this coin, right? Law enforcement, security. It's a balancing act, all right? So I think the best way to resolve this, in our minds at least, to force you to think about it, is let's have a little mini debate, and that'll be the last in-class exercise for the day, all right? So please, if you will, go to that wonderful written ice page. I will clear it out for us, and I am going to give you a stance, as I like to do, all right? So elect a leader, get next to each other, please, once I explain all this. Elect a leader of your group, and then you'll click submit, and remember that will give you a group number. And based on that, here's my question for you. Here's our debate. Should software companies be required to include backdoors into their systems for law enforcement in particular to use? If nobody else can get in but law enforcement, is it a good idea, right? Is it a good idea if that's the goal, right? And if you're an odd-numbered group, here's what I want you to say. If you're an even-numbered group, here's what I want you to think. All right. So if you are in an odd-numbered group, I would like you to write down at least 2 good arguments saying, no, we should not let law enforcement even have a backdoor into software. It's not a good idea ever, and here's why. 2 good reasons why. If you're an even-numbered group, I want you to argue the opposite. I'd like you to say, yes, it is totally a good thing for law enforcement to have backdoors made for them by software companies. Here are 2 good reasons why. Okay? Does that make sense? Yeah, so please get together, get close with some people, and come up with some good arguments, and we'll talk about it. All right? Force you to think about this, even if it's a stance you don't agree with.
You mentioned about Telegram. It orders finally accepted to give a
That's right. I think I saw that today, actually.
yes, it's a finally accepted. It remove some function. For example, person neighboring. Some people do buying, some people selling something with this
Mhm.
function. Now it's
Okay, yeah, I don't know how I feel about
removed.
that.
Neighboring and selling everything. So now it's removed. And every government can buy
Yeah,
and
that's
finally open.
yeah, that's a great example of all this. Yeah.
Yes. 70% people in Russia, for example, using Telegram because
Mm.
this will not give up.
Yeah, that was one reason why they went to that.
Are addicted to like to watch it.
Exactly. That's a great example. All right, I hope we got an odd group and anything. Sound like we stopped talking. Is that enough time for us to get our stuff in and click submit? Are we still typing out? All right, yeah, take your time. Don't worry. I want to encourage discussion. Yeah, two good arguments. At least. Give me another minute or so to finish up typing. Back. All right, that is my timer. Right. How we doing? See that something got added. So yeah, let's look. Very nice, very nice. Let's look at these together. If you're still typing, don't worry. Let's go to the one that was here first. Group 75. So that was an odd group. Perfect. We got an odd group and an even group. So the odd one was saying no bad for backdoors. Why? All right. So let's see. Okay, good. Yeah. So law enforcement doesn't have to be good. Like even if we don't want to pick on the U.S., you can imagine like that there's a bunch of countries where the law enforcement is not the most trusted. Plenty of countries that you can think of that come to mind, not just the U.S. Then like, all right, then those backdoors can be used for malicious intent. Very good. Yeah. So like, if the police are bad, or just we have one rogue cop or something that wants to get in, then suddenly we have issues. And then also, very good. Yeah, if you give a backdoor for law enforcement, that just leaves it wide open for somebody else to get in as well. Awesome. Yeah, those are great create arguments. And then, yeah, for the even group, we're saying we like backdoors. Why could we like backdoors? All right. Crime for sure. That's the standard good argument. Nice. Can help prevent crime. Just make sure that like we can watch in on things and hopefully stop things from happening if we notice issues. That's totally a use case, and that has been used for that. And then can prevent evidence from being erased. Yeah, that's true. So yeah, as long as there's a way for you to get in, you can make sure like if somebody wants to go and delete something, get it ahead of time. That kind of the idea. Yeah, I like it. Yeah, any thoughts? Any other comments about this? Like we had heard about Telegram, like they did something weird today.
What did they do?
What was it? Did you want to explain? It was like they're giving backdoors out now. Essentially, is that what you said? Not as secure as we thought it was. I think I read about it on Hacker News. We can look at that in a second. Or we can just search for a Telegram in the news. App to provide more data to governments. There we go. Crazy. All right, so yeah, we have some strong opinions maybe about that now. I don't know. So yeah, thank you for that. Good thoughts. And let's think about this. What else could we do? We could always come at this from the perspective of our boys. If we ever forget or we ever are not sure, we can always think about like, what would Kant think about this? What would Mill think about this? We can use that to like understand our own thoughts a little bit better, maybe. So Kant would always like to use the word always, right? Pro individual freedoms as well. It's like, should we always be giving things to law enforcement when they need it? That's probably the question that Kant would ask. And honestly, I could see the answer going either way, because like you could think that like, oh no, Kant really likes personal liberties, like he likes freedom of speech for sure, things like that. And so maybe he is more pro privacy, and like he would say no to that. On the other hand, like, all right, if just imagine like I am the victim of some crime, right? I imagine that you're a victim of some crime. Like, would you always want cops to be able to get information that they needed as fast as possible? I think you would probably say yes to that, right? So that's one way of using Kantianism to like argue for backdoors. Okay, so there's that. Mill, what would a utilitarian think? Like, where's the utility? Again, you make your pro-con list. Like, okay, what are some arguments for backdoors? Arguments against backdoors? Like squashing down crime, right? Making sure that we can get access to information that will help convict people, send them to jail if they're bad, and keep them there in theory. And then there's also plenty of arguments against, like, okay, this is a privacy issue, right? This is my private data. Nobody ever should be able to see that. That is the whole point, right? I don't want to tell anybody about it. This should be protected. Okay, so yeah, you can think about it either way, and then like it's always you at the end deciding who wins the balancing act game. Okay, so yeah, a bunch of cool topics today to get us thinking, and hopefully they were interesting to you. I like talking about it. Any questions about any of that? So I think that is all that I wanted to say for the lecture today. All right, we learned some cool stuff. Don't forget about fallacies, because I will give you a essay on that soon. And yeah, it's just the lecture for the day. So that is all that I have.